The mansion stood at the edge of the city like a monument of wealth and pride. Its windows gleamed under the morning sun and the tall iron gates cast shadows across the marble driveway. Inside lived Adrian Cole, a man whose fortune was legendary in every circle of society. He had businesses across continents, investments in every market, and a lifestyle that most only dreamed of. Yet for all his wealth, his heart often felt heavier than gold. Adrian had spent decades building his empire, and in the process he had learned to trust almost no one. Employees came and went, friends disappeared when the money stopped flowing, and even family often looked at him with eyes that measured value in assets and not love. He carried suspicion in every interaction. For him, trust was not freely given. It was tested. Among the many staff members who worked in his sprawling estate was a maid named Elena. She was quiet, diligent, and often invisible in her movements. She carried herself with humility, rarely spoke unless spoken to, and never once asked for favors. Unlike others, she never sought his attention or looked at him with greedy eyes. Yet her silence and honesty made her stand apart. One evening, as Adrian sat in his study surrounded by ledgers and contracts, he decided on a test. For too long he had wondered whether the girl who dusted his shelves and polished his floors was truly different, or if, like the others, she would reveal a hunger for what glittered behind locked doors. He stood from his desk, walked to the tall safe that sat against the wall, and turned its heavy wheel. With a deep creak it opened, revealing stacks of money, bars of gold and jewels that caught the light like frozen fire. He left the safe door wide open, its glow filling the room with temptation. Then he walked out and left the house silent. Elena entered the study hours later, carrying a tray of polished rags and cleaning oil. She noticed the open safe at once. Her eyes flickered toward it, but her steps did not falter. She dusted the shelves, wiped the desk, and polished the handles of drawers. She worked slowly with care, as she always did. Yet the golden light spilled across her face, reminding her with each breath that riches sat unguarded only steps away. Her hands trembled slightly as memories surfaced. Her family back in the village lived in poverty. Her mother was ill, her younger brothers often hungry, and the roof of their house leaked whenever rain fell. One handful of money from that safe could change their lives forever. She could imagine her brothers in new clothes, her mother with medicine, her father no longer bent under debt. She stood still for a long moment, staring at the safe. But then she shook her head, closed her eyes, and whispered a quiet prayer. Slowly she stepped forward, not to take but to push the heavy door shut. The creak of metal filled the study as she sealed the riches away and spun the wheel until it clicked locked once more. She placed her rag back on the tray, picked it up, and left the room with quiet dignity. Unbeknownst to her, Adrian had been watching. Hidden behind the heavy curtains, he had witnessed every flicker of temptation, every pause, every breath. And when he saw her close the safe, not with greed but with reverence, his eyes filled with tears. For the first time in many years his guarded heart cracked. He had seen proof of honesty without price. That night he could not sleep. He replayed the scene over and over. Elena had chosen integrity over fortune, though the fortune lay within her reach. In the morning he summoned her to the study. She entered with her head bowed, unsure why she had been called. Adrian stood near the desk, his eyes red from lack of sleep. He asked her why she had not touched the safe. Her voice was quiet but steady. She said, the money was not hers and she had no right to take what was not earned. She added that her work was her pride and she would not stain her family's honor with theft. His throat tightened as he listened. Rarely had words pierced him so deeply. He wanted to reward her, to lift her family from suffering and shower her with gratitude. But his pride as a man who always tested and never trusted still held him back. He dismissed her with thanks, though his eyes glistened with unspoken emotion. Days turned into weeks, yet Adrian could not forget her words. He began noticing how Elena carried herself, how she worked tirelessly without complaint, how she treated every corner of the mansion as though it were her own home. For a moment he felt the stirrings of something he thought long dead, respect and affection. But fate rarely rewards purity without trial. Elena's family tragedy grew heavier. Her mother's illness worsened. Her father wrote to her with pleas for help. She saved what little she could from her wages, but it was never enough. Her nights became restless, her eyes shadowed with worry. Adrian observed her struggle, though she hid it as best she could. One evening he tried to reach out. He offered to raise her salary or provide assistance through a foundation. Yet Elena refused gently. She said charity felt like pity and she would not accept what she had not earned. She wanted only the dignity of her work, nothing more. Her words stabbed him with pain, for he longed to give but she would not take. He began writing letters at night, unsent confessions of admiration and sorrow. In them he called her the purest soul he had ever met. He wrote of how her honesty had restored his belief in humanity. But none of those letters left his desk drawer. One stormy evening Elena approached him in the hall. Her face was pale, her eyes red. She asked for leave to return to her village. Her mother's condition had worsened and she could no longer stay. Adrian felt his chest tighten like of ice. He wanted to stop her, to reveal his feelings, to beg her to remain. Yet pride and fear of rejection froze his tongue. He simply nodded, gave her blessing and walked away, though his heart screamed. The next morning she was gone. The halls of the mansion echoed with silence. Adrian wandered through rooms that once felt alive with her quiet presence. He entered the study, saw the safe locked and untouched, and collapsed into the leather chair. For the first time in decades he wept openly. Months passed. He continued his empire, but wealth felt emptier than ever. Every letter from his businesses, every report of profit only deepened his loneliness. The safe still stood in his study, but to him it was no longer filled with gold. It was filled with the memory of her hands closing it shut. One evening he received a letter written in shaky ink. It was from Elena. Her mother had passed away and her family remained in hardship. She wrote not for help but to thank him for the years of work and for treating her with dignity. She ended by saying that the mansion, though grand, had never been her home and that she prayed for his happiness. Adrian clutched the letter until it wrinkled beneath his fingers. He pressed it to his chest as tears streamed down his face. The empire he had built felt like sand slipping through his hands. He realized he had tested the wrong thing. He had tested her honesty, but he had not trusted her heart. And now she was gone forever. The mansion grew colder as seasons passed. His health began to fail, his steps slower, his nights longer. He often sat by the window staring at the road that led away from the estate, wondering if one day he would see her figure again. But the road remained empty. In his final days Adrian sat in his study surrounded by wealth. That no longer meant anything. The safe loomed in the corner, silent and locked. He no longer saw gold within it. He saw the image of a humble maid pushing the door shut, choosing dignity over fortune. That image became the treasure he could never lose, yet it was also the wound he could never heal. As he closed his eyes for the last time he whispered her name. And though the mansion remained grand and his fortune immense, the world knew him only as a man who died rich. But in truth he died broken by the loss of the only soul who had ever proven that love and honesty were worth more than all the gold in the world.